Hey, Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Brett. Great to be here.
No, this is my pleasure. I've been excited about this one. You and I got connected probably a couple months ago, and this is a topic story. It's near and dear to my heart. I'm not very good at it. I'm continuing to work at it, but I know how important it is, one, for our audience and a bunch of escapees starting to tell their own story outside of corporate. So I'm thrilled that you decided to come on and join us.
Well, absolutely. It's always really fun for me to share these tools. It's literally the most powerful force one can wield to affect human behavior. Story is, and so my time doing this is always a pleasure. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, let's kick off a little bit and just, share with the audience a little bit of what you're doing today, who you work with. I kind of teased it a little bit, but so break down your company, who you work with, all the good stuff.
Yeah. Well, your mission, Brett, and the whole idea of corporate escape kind of resonated with me because I often will joke that I break people out of jail. And what that means is that often business owners and entrepreneurs will start something in the pursuit of freedom, the creative freedom, financial freedom, time freedom, whatever it is. And suddenly they find themselves trapped by the very thing that was supposed to provide all this freedom, which I think is just cruel irony. So what I like to do is use the power of story in order to break people free from that and build the business and life that really they expected when they set out. And that is story is the common sort of tool that I'll use to do that. But there's a bunch of things we get to work on in that process.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's funny you said break people out of jail. I did a post not too long ago on comparing corporate with Shawshank Redemption and how eerily similar those two were, right? With, the person that shouldn't have been in corporate but had a plan to get out, and the reluctant escapee who trusted the process, who had a guide, which we'll get to here in a little bit. And then the one that just had no sense, didn't know how to fit in the outside world, and didn't do very well, to put it bluntly. If people haven't seen the movie, we won't spoil it. But anyway,
it's always fun to watch those movies.
So I know
you kind of get the sense for which characters and which role, and we'll talk more about that. But they're all based on a universal truth that is about story.
Yeah, and I know you started your business, at least this iteration of it, about 10 years ago. Maybe share with the audience how you moved into, or what captivated you to move and become into the story brand or the story side of the business.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I originally started my business out of an adventure sport background. I was actually a professional kayaker and promoted brands in the outdoor industry, as well as coached people in the sport on the water. And I found there to be a lot of parallels. Like teaching someone to run a waterfall and teaching them to run a business are actually not that different. But I've also had a lot of business management experience in that. We grew, and I worked in leading the programs in the largest paddle sports instruction center and retail center on the West Coast, and grew that company from about 6 employees to about 46 employees and multiple locations. And combining the promoting of those brands, the small business management and leadership experience, as well as the brand promoting experience and the marketing side, all of those really came together for me in about 10 years ago when our son was on the way. I was really wanting to create a lifestyle and a business that allowed me to have the weekends available and the funds and resources, honestly, to be able to take him on the sort of adventures that I was taking clients on at the time. And I was having running around promoting all these brands and going to competitions and filming things for National Geographic and whatever else extravagant lifestyle. It still didn't provide me the type of real freedom I wanted. So that's really how I got started in this space of coaching, because I had an event I was running with a fellow coach who was doing a lot of executive coaching and had brought his sport coaching background and a similar sort of skill set I had into that world, and was doing quite well. And so he mentored me at first, and that's really when I got my start with the first few clients. I had Thursdays and Fridays off from my normal work and lifestyle, and so I spent Thursdays networking and Fridays working with clients. And then that brought me to StoryBrand, Donald Miller's work, when I was really looking to help clients find their voice and find their story and their message for the marketplace. It was just the perfect fit. So that kind of progression from adventure athlete and eventually an author into this coaching space was one that seems a little bit different or not what you'd expect. I don't have a counseling degree. I don't have an MBA, but I've learned a lot along the way from some of the most exciting and sort of difficult classrooms that there is out there in the wilderness and in the business community, running businesses and promoting those brands.
That's awesome. And for the record, you may be or have at least one of the coolest backgrounds of one of the guests that we've had come on the program. So, most of us are, we're shackled in corporate for 20 or 30 years. You came from a professional kayaking in the great outdoors. And
I get it though.
Again, I'm also a huge believer in.
The people I would take out on the water on weekends, there were folks that were trapped Monday through Friday in these situations where the only respite, the only chance they had to get out and explore was on the weekend. And I could see their eyes open up, and I could see them all of a sudden see the possibility of, if I could only just get to the ocean a little more often, or if I could just get to the river a little more often when I wanted to, when the rain was raining and the river was up, not missing those opportunities. It really gave them a reason to go ahead and shift their lifestyle and make some of the big scary changes that come along with quitting your day job. I ultimately did the same thing. I had to give up my healthcare, give up my salary, my cushy outdoor industry management gig with the business, and do those Thursdays and Fridays and go out on my own and take that scary leap as well. So I get that side of it. It's just, I happen to have a fun job. People think it's really fun being able to take folks on in the water, but so much of it was behind a computer and a whiteboard and a set of calendar days and behind a phone booking things and creating the opportunity for those folks to go on those adventures. Getting out to go out on the water was a great piece of it, but only a small piece.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so a perfect reminder, if you get out there that's listening and still in corporate and you hate your job, think of it. Paul had a really cool job and he still broke free to go find the freedom. And, it's interesting because one of the things that I found over the 4 years that I've been out, because when I left, I've been straight, it was to replace income, make more money.
Yeah.
It wasn't until about 2 years in that I realized all of a sudden I had time and my time, and how valuable that was. And then I started the wellness, and, it really started, again, maybe I'm late to the party with these thoughts, but it was really around, now I've got a life where work fits into it versus, the 20 years, it was a job and we had to fit life around the corporate calendar and meetings and all those commutes, all those things. So
I think a lot of times for the modern
awesome.
entrepreneur and the modern employee, really, the idea of work-life balance is a bit of a cruel myth. And it's not that we should be working all the time. It's just, it's not reality. These aren't separate worlds. We have, it's also a very tenuous relationship, right? Like as soon as something's out of balance, suddenly it's a terrible thing. But have you ever seen something that grows really fast? Like take teenagers, for example, rapid growth, completely imbalanced. They're all over the show. And sometimes when we're growing fast, there isn't always balance, right? And so I talk a lot about work-life integration, and especially in the entrepreneurial space, when you are in control of your own time and your own schedule, how do you integrate these worlds? And it does come back to story in a lot of ways. Because what's your lived story? What's your experience that you really want to have in this entrepreneurial lifestyle that is not easy? It's not an easy step to take, but it does provide you the ability to write your own story and to have that sort of level of freedom. And I think that's a lot of times what people are needing and seeking, even if they have a cool job.
Yeah, no, I think obviously the pandemic opened our eyes to some of the work-life balance that we weren't seeing or didn't have, and we got a taste of it, and all of a sudden it's changed. And again, I think for me at least, mid-50s, I'm thinking, man, I still hopefully healthy, stay active. I've got another 30 years. What am I going to do? And I want it to be, I'm never going to retire. It's just, I just don't see that, but I want to do what I want to do. And how do we find that balance? So
it's key.
Yeah, and I think this story, tying it back to but so many of us missed it, right? I mean, it took me
Yeah.
so long to figure it out. I say better late than never, but
100%.
but that's why the mission, right? The 10,000 Gen Xers to get them out of corporate and find this lifestyle. And yep, I guess you're a perfect person to help. So because as we've been in the corporate confines, right, we're rewarded for not rocking the boat and
That's right.
staying within the lines. But now all of a sudden now, almost everybody that I've worked with or in the community is looking at a solo business, right? They're not building the next Google. They may do a small agency. They may do something small.
Sure.
But all of a sudden, we're not telling the company's story, right? We got to tell our own story, and that's terrifying. And I shared with you offline when I started. I mean, I 100% get the story brand framework. I get it. I buy into it. But when I start applying it to me, I start to shake, thinking, like, did I get this right? So maybe we could use, the next part of this time just demystify the story for us, and how do we start thinking about our personal outside of what corporate was?
Well, you bring up a great point, and often in corporate, we're handed our work or our clients, and we're not necessarily responsible for the marketing side of things. Or even if we are, like you said, you go to implement a really effective framework, and we fall over ourselves because it's our own stuff, and we get in our own way. And I'll be honest, as a guide and as somebody who works on messaging and story for businesses all the time, when I get to my own stuff, I have trouble too. I get a fellow story brand guide to help me and to help coach me along, because just the outside perspective, we're sometimes too close to it to be effective at really knowing what it is that's going to move the audience. But when we talk about story in this framework, it's so universal, right? It goes back to, I mean, story's been around for thousands of years in this form, Aristotle and before, where it can be applied universally. So leadership, marketing, which we often think of marketing as the outside market, but really we have to market to ourselves and our own business too. But also our own path. And how do we position ourselves in our own story? And suddenly when we're in this space and we've done a lot of the should-haves, we've sort of, we should go to school and we should get the job and we should have kids and we should get a family. And we all of a sudden we end up like shooting all over ourselves when we could really still have time to create what that next chapter needs to be for you. And we talk about the narrative void. Like if you were sitting watching a movie and the credits were rolling and you watched all the credits and you were just still there as the person was around, like cleaning up the popcorn in the theater and everyone's gone, that sense of emptiness can happen in our lives too. We can have all the should-haves done and all of a sudden realize, like, is that it? Like, I'm not fulfilled yet. And so what this story could mean how you're positioning yourself in your own journey, in your own entrepreneurial story. But the basics of this is that there's 7 parts. There's 7 parts to almost every single successful story. Okay. And when you get to a story and you just like, I don't really know what that was about, or it feels like kind of a flat story, it's probably missing one or all of these 7 parts. Essentially, every story is about transformation. It's about how the main character changes over time by overcoming adversity to get something that they want. So when a hero hits a story, we think of the hero as like a strong character. They're not, right? Not especially not in the beginning, because they don't quite have the tools. They're not sure if they can do it. They want something. And if you don't know what the character wants pretty early in a movie, it loses you. So about 5 seconds in, you need to know what the character wants. And then they hit a problem. It's the same thing for our clients, same thing for ourselves in this story. Now, if this story is about you and your entrepreneurial journey, you want to be the hero. You have this problem. You want to escape your corporate life, or you want to go on this journey and build this business, but you hit a problem. It's the same thing for your clients. So if you're thinking about this story from the perspective of marketing, then you want to think about how you're inviting the client into this story. And we'll talk about positioning and how that differs here in a second. But as a story goes, the hero hits a problem, and this problem always exists on 3 levels. There's external, internal, and philosophical. Most sell solutions to external problems. Most consumers buy because of internal problems. And those internal problems are the emotions. It's how they're feeling about that external problem.
Okay.
So if you're wanting to build your own business and you're wanting to escape the corporate life and do something different, well, the external problem might be, I need to make income, I need to pay healthcare, I need to feed my kids, I need to, find clients. Internally, how you're feeling about that problem Scared, intimidated, might be a failure. People might laugh at me. My corporate friends think I'm crazy. Whatever the fear or emotional thing is.
All the
And then you
above.
have the philosophical problem of like, I shouldn't be trapped. All this skill and all this talent's going to waste, serving some other corporate interest. I need to be doing my own thing. I'm wasting my life doing this thing. If you can have a solution where you solve a client's external, internal, and philosophical problem with one action, you have a successful business. If you have a plot line that solves all those problems for the character in one climactic scene, you have a best picture. Star Wars, Death Star in the universe, external problem. Am I a Jedi? Can I wield the Force? Internal uncertainty, philosophical good versus evil in the universe. Right, like when you make that shot from that X-wing fighter and that impossible shot down the canyon, and you are a Jedi, right? It's clear, it's obvious, and you've just defeated the Death Star. Good versus evil in the universe is restored. All of a sudden, all those things come together. So there's those three levels of problem. The hero never solves all three levels of problem on their own, do they? For thousands of years,
no.
Storytellers have always brought in another character. And this is the positioning part, right? This is where you have to be careful on what story are you telling. If you go and tell your marketing story and you say, my new company is going to be amazing because I worked at this XYZ corporate for this long and I've got all these awards and I'm on a mission to do XYZ great thing in the marketplace. And well, those are all cool, but those are all things about you. You're the hero of that story. And that makes sense. We all wake up as the hero, the protagonist in our own story. But you know what? So does our client. And so if you do that in marketing, where's there room for that client in that story? And there's only four main roles, right? There's hero, victim, villain, and guide. And so if that client's not the hero, if you're the hero, well, the client can't be the guide. There must be the victim or the villain. So we need to figure out hero, victim, villain, guide, these four role main characters. Who are we and which story are we telling? Now, if you're telling the story that is dealing with this entrepreneurial story, you're the hero of it. You have hit these three philosophical, internal, and external levels of problem. That guide enters the story at that point. Yoda, Obi-Wan, right? That outside character that helps the hero win the day, that really brings them a plan and calls them to action. So the hero, part one, hits a problem, part two, finds a guide. In the marketing story, if you're going out and you're trying to find clients, you want to position yourself as the guide. You want to be the guide. It's a big mantra we have in Story Brand Land, is be the guide. And if you can be that guide, that means you have empathy and competency to solve the problem. You understand the problem, all three levels. You get it, you empathize, and once that hero character understands that you get it and empathize, they know how much you care. Now they care how much you know. Now you bring the competency. Now you show I can be your guide because XYZ problems are something I deal with all the time. Look at all the things all the results I've gotten, all that stuff. That might show up in a website as testimonials. That might show up in a proposal as a case study. That might show up in a sales pitch as a story that you can relate back to a client you helped similar to them and what the results were. But you want to be the guide in that story. And that means the story really is about the hero. And so we, as guides, are going to give a plan, which is the next part. The plan of the story is really those three easy steps. And I talk about this. I bring my river guide background into this sometimes. And I talk about how I, as a new, young guide out there on the water trying to help people, I would try to give all the details and all the steps on running that waterfall. Here's what you're going to need to do at the top. And here's what you need to do at the bottom. And, you're going to take that hard stroke on the right side, right at the lip of the waterfall. And you're going to land with the boat off center, just a little weight on your left hip so that you can carve off into the eddy on the left, all this detail. And I would be like, all right, you ready to go? Come on, follow me down this waterfall. And the student would just be like, gripped to the rock. You'd have like finger dents in the granite rock. They were holding on to it so hard. And I changed, right? I shifted my guiding. I shifted my way I brought them along. And I would just roll up and I would say, hey, this is going to be really fun down here, this waterfall. There's 3 steps. We're going to go off to the left. We're going to take a stroke with our right paddle blade off the top. And then we're going to end on the left. left, right, left. You ready to go? And they'd still be scared. They'd still have eyes the size of saucers. But when I paddled away, they'd be behind me. I'd be leading them into that next rapid, that next waterfall. So we need a plan. We need a really clear plan. And that often in a marketing sense could just be 3 clear steps on the website of what's going to happen when they click that button, that call to action button that books a session with you or books an appointment with you for your sales proposal kind of discovery meeting. But having those clear steps right there. In a leadership, it might be giving your kid or your employee or a contractor 3 clear steps that happens next. As a guide, as a coach for businesses, I will often end a session with, what are your 3 clear action steps? That plan, our brain works really well in 3s. You get more than about 4 steps. I tell them more than about 4 or 5 things ahead of that waterfall, and your brain shuts down. People don't move into a fog. And so that's really, really, really key. But what does that guide do? They gives you the plan and they call you to action. The call to action is the part that often people miss or get shy about, especially if they've been in corporate and they haven't had to do the selling part. We get really bashful. Sometimes it's just because we don't want to be pushy or salesy, or we don't want to be seen as sort of too aggressive. But really, a good guide is going to call their hero client to action. And that might be something really clear and direct, like click here to book now on a website. Or it might be, let's go ahead and get you started on that contract. I'll send over the agreement. Whatever the thing is that gets you that first client, or that signs that big deal, that lets you take that big step and quit your day job. It might require an uncomfortable step. It might require calling your hero to action. And there's some things we get into on a marketing front around transitional calls to action, ways that you can kind of invite that hero to take a little baby step. It might be just to give up their email address to get a free guide on how to do XYZ thing in their business that you can help them with. But that creating that opportunity for different decision makers is often a thing. So from there, you really have 2 outcomes. You've called the hero to action. There's either a successful right off into the sunset sort of moment, and this climactic scene ends and things are all well, or a tragic failure, right? That's the universal framework for a story. Either way, that hero transforms in the end for having gone after what they want, overcoming those 3 levels of problem, meeting their guide, and really having a plan that they take action on. They're going to transform over that process, and it either is a successful end or a tragic failure. In our marketing and our sales and our leadership, we just have to paint that picture for people. We just have to remind them what their life looks like when they take the positive step to work with us, or what could be the results of inaction. It might even just be a question at the end of a proposal, and ask, for you, what doesn't change, or what happens if we don't move forward with what I've proposed today. I used the story of this, so and we actually had a client. I work with somebody who asked that question, and the client said, "Well, I'd have to move back to my home country if they didn't get the work done and it wasn't successful." Like it went all the way to that philosophical level of problem. Not only would I not improve my sales, or my marketing wouldn't be as effective, or whatever, sure, there might even be past the emotional part of like, well, I worry about the business not being successful. If that business wasn't successful, they would actually have to move back to their home country. They'd have to relocate them and their family. All of a sudden, you have a clear picture of the story you're actually inviting them into. And so you're actually able to serve them at a higher level. And that is the power of the story, is that people don't buy things to satisfy that external problem, even though that's what they arrive wanting, or the thing that you might say you solve in your business. They move and take action because of those internal and philosophical problems. So if you don't get into those layers, you're missing the story, and you're really losing the opportunity to inspire that hero to take action, to follow that plan, and to actually get the successful results you're hoping to provide. And so that's the basic 7 parts of the story.
It's so good. And what I love about it is it's I want to call it simple. It is. You're really breaking it down into.
It's not new, but it's digestible. You can use
easy
that
way.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, and I love the power of 3. That is, a thing I need to remember because I tend to go to 5, so I'll figure out how to get to 3.
Think about
And
like
I bet, and I'm
think
going to
about
get your
like all
perspective, that a
the
lot.
real plans that you have to come up with, like like think about like stop, drop, and roll. But we all grew up
Yeah,
Gen Xers, right? I was like, I thought we'd all
100.
catch on fire a lot
Oh
more
yeah,
often, considering how often they drilled that into us, the stop, drop, and
for
roll.
sure.
There's 3 steps to that plan though, right? And you still remember it.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I'm guessing where some people get tripped up, and I see brands do this, is the confusing the hero and the guide, right? We want to make ourselves as the business owner and as the consultant the hero, and that's
Right.
our instinct. But I love the guide analogy because I see myself more as a guide than a coach. The guide makes sense. So
It resonates.
that's probably a big pay attention to, right? Is you are the guide, you are not the hero
That
in this
paradigm
story,
shift
right?
is the biggest takeaway for most brands. Most brands accidentally end up positioning themselves as as the hero of the story, and they really need to be the guide. And when we make that shift, it all of a
Yeah.
sudden changes everything, because suddenly the words on your website are from a whole totally different perspective, and the way that your sales team approaches, and this might just be you as a solopreneur, but suddenly as you look through that lens as the guide of the story rather than the hero, it can change everything, and it can really take some pressure off. Being a guide, of course, resonated with me from my adventure sport background, literally guiding people, but gosh, it takes that spotlight off of you and really helps keep it on the client, which is what's important anyway, and really lets you come alongside that client and
Right.
help them and serve them rather than sell them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And right as you're going through this, I'm starting to apply this like to the escapee business or the community, right? I'm like, all right,
100%.
so we do have it. So the hero is the people stuck in corporate. They're dealing with the external,
Yes.
which is benefits and salary. The internal is the fulfillment and what am I doing?
Mm.
Is there more? My
Mm.
role isn't to be the hero, but provide the guideline, the posts, the things to help get them out.
Yep.
And I
We can
shouldn't be
share
using
that.
more than three steps to stay right. That
Yeah.
it's consumable and it's understandable and it's
Hmm.
actionable. Man, you made that. I think I read Donald Miller's book a couple times, and I've listened to it in podcasts. And again, you just broke that down in 6 minutes in a way that made it really actionable. So I appreciate that. So I hope everybody out there who's listening, who's taking notes, go back and re-listen to this, because this is a perfect framework to start thinking about what you want to do with your clients.
Yeah. It is definitely
So
an important
you've
step for
obviously
everyone to
delivered this
take.
before.
That's it. Well, and what happens, Brett, is you start seeing
Yeah.
and applying it to everyday life. I mean, not only do you bug your spouse or your friends because you know what's happening in that show or that movie next, because you can lay the framework right over the top of that plot line, and you're like, so and so dies in like 10 minutes. My wife doesn't like watching movies with me as much anymore, but you start to apply it to your life, like my parenting. I start to figure out like, hey, my kid from his perspective is on a hero journey about this thing. Why are they so bent out of shape wanting to wear the socks that his brother has on right now because his brother just stole his socks out of his drawer? Like, what is the external problem? His brother stole socks. Internally feeling, well, maybe he's feeling a little bit like left out, or a little bit like he doesn't get to have the say or the control, right? And philosophically, little brother is always in that position, and he shouldn't feel disempowered that way all of the time. He should be able to wear his socks, right? And all of a sudden I'm parenting in a different way because I approach that hero and come alongside them as a guide type figure and really figure out what's the plan. How can we call you to action that's going to be empowering? And all of a sudden everything starts to shift. So when you use it a lot, it's just right there and becomes really handy. That's what's great about frameworks, is you can apply them in
Yeah.
different contexts, and they're simple enough you can use them on the fly.
Yeah, this is such a good life framework, and I never would have thought of it that way until we started talking. But yeah, parenting is perfect, even just in some of your social media posts or anything, right? I think
Yes.
even the framework you had mentioned early on, the what did you mention? what the hero was trying to accomplish and what the obstacle was. I'm like, yeah, that's
Yeah.
everything, you right?
Oh my gosh.
That's
Yeah.
what we're
Yep.
trying to accomplish.
If you're not
And
speaking through
other
the
thing I took
framework
out,
like a
I took
filter, like if you're not using that framework like a filter and speaking from one of those 7 parts of it distinctly, you're probably missing the audience. You're probably getting tuned out. I mean, we hear 10,000 marketing messages a day on average now, and from different sources. We're getting bombarded. And so if you're not cutting through all of that by using story, which is how our brains make sense of information, it's how we make sense of the world. Our brain constructs a story about all the sensory stuff we have coming in and decides that that's the reality that we're perceiving. Then you're missing a big piece of the puzzle. And so use it as a filter. Use it for every social media post. Use it for, it's like chords on a song or on a guitar. You can play these different chords, different pieces of these 7 parts of the story in different ways, in different orders, in different contexts. And when you get skilled at that, suddenly you can make beautiful music around your messaging, around your leadership, around your own story. Using this to craft a goal narrative is one of the first steps I take when I work with a business owner, and we start figuring out how are they a hero on a mission? How are they taking their story and using the business as a vehicle or like an airplane to get where they want to go?
Yeah, so good. And if you don't mind, can we just run the really quick recap what those 7 steps were again? Because I was lost in the story as we were talking. I'm sure I didn't capture them.
Yeah. So the hero, that's fine. The hero wants something. Yep. So what the hero wants. Second step is problem, and that's on 3 levels. What's the problem? They want this, but they hit this problem. Third step's guide. All right. How are we going to position ourselves with a competency and empathy? The guide gives a plan, which is the 4th step. That plan's in three steps, right? So the story has 7 parts. The plan has 3 steps. That plan then needs to be acted on. So the 5th one is call to action. And that action results in either a successful or unsuccessful ending. So that's part 6 and 7. Really, and all of this comes back to, again, character transformation. Every story is really about how the hero transforms. And so sometimes I'll start there. Sometimes I'll figure out what's the transformation I'm really looking to make for people, and how can I work backwards from there? How can I get the hero what they want and solve their problem and be a good guide for them and call them to action so that they have this transformational experience? Because that's what people want more than anything else, right? We want to transform into a better version of ourselves, and that's what's going to drive it.
So good. And maybe there's a part 2 of this down the road, because then I'm starting to see, right, how you get that emotion and some of these things into your copy versus here's our solutions, right? It's more about the solving the internal without saying you're solving the internal, and it's the feeling that goes people along with it.
That's what moves people. Can I give you one little tool or one little thing you can use to dig into that a little bit? So I love being able to apply this stuff. Information's great. Please. The framework's out there. I mean, you can Google anything, but here's something that I think you can use, anybody can use to really dig a little deeper. So you have that moment where you're trying to figure out, what is the internal and philosophical problem I'm going to solve? Right now I have this client or this lead in front of me who's got an obvious external problem that I work with. Cool. That's not why they're going to buy from you. What is the actual piece of the puzzle? Brett, is there anything that you have recently spent money on or that you plan to spend money on? Large or small purchase, doesn't matter. Is there something you've bought recently or you're going to buy?
Well, my car lease is up. I haven't been driving it at all, so I'm struggling with what am I going to do. So it's a big purchase that's coming, right?
Got it. So vehicle purchase or something. You have a need of transportation for yourself.
Yes.
Okay. What's important to you about that?
I'm conflicted right now, to be honest with you, because it's, there's nothing cheap. I don't drive it that far, but we need it just because we need more than one car, right? It's my wife and I now that are home,
More than
and
one
I don't
car.
drive that often, but it's
Yeah.
more
Mm-hmm.
often. Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
what am I going to spend to have it sit in the garage most of the time?
What's important to you about having
So
more than
even though
one
my
car?
lease is coming up on my current car,
Yeah.
just from probably the convenience aspect of it, right? So one or the other of us isn't dropping us off somewhere. We do have to be in different places. It's just
Okay.
not frequent. Like when I was working and going downtown, using it every day. Now I'm not,
Yeah.
and so that's where I'm conflicted about how do I solve this. And to be
Mm.
honest, so what am I doing? I'm not doing anything. My lease is up in like 6 weeks. If I haven't scheduled my return, I'm like, maybe I just extend this. So even though I have the problem, I'm not taking action on the problem.
So I'm a little bit conflicted, and you do have things where you'll appear different places at different times. What's important to you about being able to both get to those different places, different times?
It's a good question. Maybe it's not as important, or it is. I hadn't actually thought through that. It's just what we've always done, right? Yeah. I don't know. I just can't see us taking an Uber for one-offs when we both have to be somewhere at the same time.
And what's important to you about not having to take an Uber?
It just seems. I guess it's more of the what's the word I'm looking for. It seems silly, right? That everybody has a car. You should have a car. That's the way things work. I'm in the suburbs, right? You need to have the car.
Great,
I don't
right
need my
there.
wife
So
dropping me off. So it's okay.
you're right there, right? So external problem, two people need to be two different places at the same time, they got to be able to get around. Feeling conflicted, also feeling a little silly about having to call somebody else or rely on somebody else. Like, philosophically, right? You should be able to just hop in your wheels and go. It's what you've always
Yeah.
done. You shouldn't be restricted by that. We got important things to be able to go and do. It doesn't work for our life to have to go and do that and be uncertain about those things. Wheels, sure.
Right.
What you're really buying is clarity, and not being conflicted, and also there might be a little bit of convenience or sort of status in there of like not having to rely on an Uber, being self-reliant. There's a philosophical piece of it there. So if I was to be in the leasing office and I were to be sharing what I want to about a vehicle, I could share the features and benefits of the car and talk about what a great dealership we are, and talk about all the great warranty and care and service and blah 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 blah. What we really need to do is speak to you about what is it that you really need to be able to do on these trips when you're in different places, what kind of events are they? How do you want to feel when you show up? What sort of things do you need to be able to take with you? Who's going to be riding? Are you going to give anybody a ride? Are you going to take clients in this car? What are all the things that are emotionally driving this purchasing decision? And what are all the status things there that are involved? And how can I speak to those when it's time to make the choice? When how they always slide the piece of paper and the pen across the desk and they start writing numbers down. What are the things we're going to be talking about? It sure better not be the features and benefits and what's on the dashboard of the car and whatever tire. Like, we're talking about how Brett wants to feel and how philosophically you and your partner should be able to go wherever you need to in that city and do what you need to do without worry. And it should be reliable, and you should be able to do those things. So that is an example of, so there's one question I asked to go deeper into those levels. It was one simple, plain question, and I asked it over and over again. I said very little. You did all the talking. All I asked was, what's important to you about that? What's important to you about having two cars? What's important to you about the confusion or the feeling conflicted? What's important to you about being able to just not have to do an Uber and just go whenever you want to go? What's important to you about that is the way you get deeper into the level of problem.
Yeah. And even thinking about solving my own problem, if I'm the dealer, I'm like, hey, Brett, do you realize we now have a 5,000 miles a year lease program that we didn't have for folks that don't drive as much, right? Because usually they're trying to upsell you 10,000 miles, 15,000 miles.
Sure.
My current car's got less than 10,000. I'm 3 years into it. So I'm like, somebody had a interesting or unique solution, I would connect. You're absolutely right. I would have connected with that. Huh.
Maybe you end up with a lower mileage lease, but with a nicer vehicle, because I don't do that often. But when I do it, I want to feel good. I want to show up. I want to take clients. I want to be able to do these things and ride around in some style. And maybe my payment doesn't change at all, but you just use it for fewer miles.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's so good. So good. Paul, I thank you so much for taking this time.
You're
This was super
welcome.
interesting. I got like 6 pages of notes that I've taken during this one. So appreciate it. Like I said, we will come back, I think, do a part 2, and we can go deeper into some of this because I think we just touched on the surface, but a great starting point for anybody that's either just starting their journey, or if you're in your journey, you're not thinking like this,
Yeah.
flip that mindset. So if folks want to connect with you, find out more information, your company, what's the best place for them to connect with you?
Yeah, head over to tributarycoaching.com, and there's a free consultation button on the top right corner. So that's tributary, like a small stream, tributarycoaching.com, and click the free consultation button there. You can jump on the calendar I do a free session available there. And you can also get a free 7-day trial to Business Made Simple, which is going to be a great learning platform that brings forth the StoryBrand framework, but also gives you access to all the different learning modules that we use within Business Made Simple. Everything from leadership to negotiation to sales to marketing. It's really a treasure trove. So head to tributarycoaching.com.
Awesome. And Paul's got some great content over there on his website as well. And by the way, it just clicked on me today, Tributary and your kayaking career. I'm like, very good.
Try to be on brand.
I get it now. I'm a little slow some days,
Feeding the
but
flow of your life and business.
I got it. That's awesome. All right. That's really good. Anyway, thanks again, Paul. We will catch up with you soon, and have a great rest of your day.
Hey, thank you, Brett. And thank you all for listening.